who is one of our neighbors, Michael Cook, who has done a number of projects in the neighborhood, Christine Kelly, another neighbor, and then Randy Mars, who's going to round out our panel. And each will have about 5 minutes to go through some of their work. And then the friends have posed about 4 questions for a general discussion after they're done showing some work. And then we'll open it up to the chat questions. And so we'll go ahead and we'll start with Rebecca, because alphabetically she's first, and I don't want to show any favoritism to neighbors or non-neighbors. So Rebecca, please feel free to take over the screen and show us some of your work.
All right, here. Let me go. There we go. Whoops. Okay, so my name is Rebecca Bostic. I am an architect. I have my own business. I live in Hollin Hills. Both my husband and I work in the office, and this year we celebrate 32 years in business. We have done over 700 house additions all over the metro area, with a dozen or so right here in Hollin Hills. So in addition to residential work, we also do commercial work, and we do school renovations and additions for Fairfax County Public Schools. But Hollin Hills, so I wanted to share 3 projects that are in my realm of being favorites. So the first one, I have a floor plan on the screen, and this is a home where we took the smaller tight rooms in the back and we reversed the flow of the house so that we put a more open space in the back connecting to the backyard. We added even more windows to what was there. So what we ended up with was a really nice, open, airy space that had living room, dining room, and kitchen. So if we walk around this space a little bit, you'll see just lots of open space. And one of my favorite Hollin Hills values is where you blur the line between inside and outside. And that was important in this house. So it's nice and open. And when you walked into the kitchen, it used to be a tight little room, kind of disconnected. Now it's just a large, airy, sun-filled space that's part of all the action. And the last piece, we added a deck off the back just to sort of transition you from inside to outside. So one project. Second project, this is actually one of my neighbors on the cul-de-sac. And her house had some serious foundation problems. And like many houses here, it was all the underlying marine clay. So we had to tear off some of the house just to repair the foundation problems. And in the process of that, we ended up solving a lot of the interior issues that she didn't like. So we added 3 different additions around the house, all keeping with the low slope gable roof shape of the existing house. This picture shows the new foyer in the front with a highlighted front door. This one shows the rebuilt master suite, now with a nice firm foundation, no longer sliding down the hill. And lastly, we went around the back and we bumped out the house just 4 feet to enlarge the 2 small bedrooms just for 2 nice sized spaces now. And the last project I wanted to show you is actually my house. And my husband and I had fun digging through pictures because we haven't seen our house like this in forever. So this is the existing house when we purchased it, and we had 3 kids, found ourselves needing a lot more space. So our first addition was bedroom space. And with our split level house, we were focusing on the 2-story space that's existing with sort of the box shape and the single slope roof. And so we added a 2nd story over the 1-story section of our house. It kind of gave you a mirror image of the existing here with the new on this side. Gave us a nice big master suite too. This is the original back of the house. And again, we were focusing on this sort of box shape with the single slope roof. And over time, we added a kitchen addition here. And one of our last additions was a guest room suite when my mother-in-law moved out of town. All with that sort of same roof shape. The one thing that the last addition created was this nice little cozy roof deck right off the living room. And it feels like we're hidden away in our gardens at times. And so this one's really for fun. This was several years back when we had the big snowstorm, but I added it because it shows all the different roof lines we have and all the big windows we have. And in our house, we're really into blurring that indoor outdoor line. And lastly, when I'm not in my office, I love to work in my garden. So hopefully you'll find me there more often this spring. And that's all I have.
Right. Some really great images, Rebecca. I really appreciate your efforts, and I had no idea you'd been going at it for so long. That's really a testament to your skill and being able to provide a service and stay in business. It's not an easy gig. Next is Michael Cook. If you would go ahead and take over the screen, Michael, and show us some of your work and tell us a little bit about your practice. You're muted, Michael.
Hi, sorry about that.
There you go. There you go.
I am Michael Cook. I run Cook Architecture. We're a firm in Falls Church, Virginia. We currently have 4 architects working with us, and we are looking for one more. So any interested parties, please forward some resumes. We have worked on about 10 Goodman or 20 Goodman projects, 10 of which are in Hollin Hills. We currently are working on 5 Goodman houses. 3 of them are in Hammond Hill and Hammond Wood over in Montgomery County, but we have 1 current project in Hollin Hills that's underway right now. I'm going to run through some of our previous work. Here, this is a project. I'm not going to name any names. We'll just stick with the addresses. Most of them are on the front of the cover page. So this first project here, the existing house this is the existing Goodman rectangle. I don't know if you can see my cursor. There was a later addition in the 60s done by Casper Neer, which is out here in the rear. And then in this section here, that's where the buildable site was. The program was to add a master bedroom and a new entry area. See, a little bit cut off here. So here the Casnier addition is here. Is the original Goodman house. And this is an entryway. And then this is the master suite and master bedroom, bathroom, and a small office in this space. Drawings are really a critical part of our design process. We bounce between drawings and 3D renderings, and of course, client interactions and meetings with the clients to come up with our designs. In this particular edition, we had a combination of different roof geometries that we utilized, but mainly they are shapes of buildings that already exist in Hollin Hills. In this particular instance, there was a little bit of a challenge because another one of our aspects when we add on to these buildings, we always want to defer to the original building and try to not exceed the height of the original building. So here we basically had to have this low pitched portion here, which acts as an entryway, and then the shed roof up over the new addition. This is an alternate color scheme to what is actually present, but it's one that we are considering. And this is the interior space. This is in the master suite looking out into the garden. There's a really dramatic view here, and the bathroom is behind that door. We also did a kitchen renovation. So inside we removed a lot of the kitchen partitions that were closed in the kitchen and sequestering it into a smaller space. And here it's mainly a large open plan. These are all poke and pole cabinetry, which is actually a really, really great product in that they can produce these large panels, custom size. So it's really more like the kitchen cabinetry becomes more like furniture than it is cabinetry. Here's interior elevation of the kitchen. Second project, 2105 Martha's Road. This is the original Goodman house here, obviously, and then our addition here. The program for that was a master suite and a home office and a little bit of storage space. So this is, again, just a really initial sketch. The existing Goodman house is here. This diagonal line here is actually a parallel setback to the property line, which is a design review committee no-no, but in this case, there was really no possible other solution. Because we wanted to include this garden space here and almost have them look as if they're separate buildings. So this roof pitch here, we have a gabled roof, low pitch gabled roof over the original Goodman building. And then the new space has a shed roof, which is also relatively low pitch. Here's some initial sketches that we found. Another thing that we also often try to do is when we bring the windows, the new windows, which are all 1.5 inches wide for copying the initial Goodman original design, we try to take them, if we can, all the way up to the ceiling height, which creates some structural complications in order to get that to happen, because here we're framing upwards. And as you can see, there's no dropped beam along here. And here's a 3D rendering. We're just trying to look at the massing of the addition. And here's the finished product. And as you can see, here the windows go clear all the way up to the ceiling, but in fact, we're framing in this direction. So we actually have a beam coming out here and another beam coming out here, and then we frame this direction in order to achieve that. It's another view. Some interior pictures. This is looking down the hallway to the master bedroom. So the door, in fact, is not at the master bedroom, but it's much further back. Another little bit of a compromise to the owners. We had to convince them that instead of having this long single corridor, which was only be like 3 or 4 feet wide, this is actually a 6'6" wide corridor. So the hallway actually becomes a little bit of a room space in getting down into the master suite. Another project also on Martha's Road. Here's the initial plan. This is not a Charles Goodman house, but still a really great mid-century building. This is the original design. It was right here, this long rectangle. Our addition is a kitchen out to the front. Here are some other drawings. One of them's a little bit cut off. So these are some early initial sketches, just different elevation studies. Inside, some tile design patterns and how we're integrating the cabinetry with open shelves and corner windows. But again, drawing is an essential part of our whole process. And here's the finished product.
You're near the end of your 5 minutes, Michael.
Okie dokie. Should I stop?
Yeah, I think so. To be fair, we want to keep it moving.
Fair enough.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And next up would be Christine Kelly, if you wouldn't mind taking over the screen and showing us some of your work and telling us a little bit about your work.
Muted.
Yep, you got it.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. My name is Christine Kelly, and my office is Crafted Architecture. I graduated from Kansas State in the mid 80s and moved out to DC and worked in DC for 10 years. And I've had Crafted Architecture going since 1995, and I live here in Hollin Hills. And I've worked on lots of residential projects and also some small commercial projects over the years. I'd like to take you through a couple of projects. This one happens to be my house, and it's a 1B. I don't know all of the Hollin Hills designations, but I do know this one. It's the split level. It's on the lower level. There's the original house had the existing kitchen and open area on the ground level, and the upper level was an open plan. And this is a photo of the existing model. This is a photo of our house under construction 20 years ago. But I wanted to show this to you because on my additions and renovations, I like to match the existing style and structure of the house and often carry some of the existing elements into the new work. And in this case, The doors here are 9-foot doors. We reused them on the new addition and kept the module of the windows on the back exactly the same. And also continued the existing cedar siding onto the new addition. So that in the new addition, the same back wall of the Goodman house is within the new kitchen addition that we moved upstairs from the lower level to help create a much more open plan. And you can see following my cursor, the lines of where the existing house was to keep a little historical marker between the existing and the new. This house is to show you an example of an interior renovation. We didn't do any additional add-ons. We completely gutted the house and rebuilt it, rebuilt the walls, insulated. We took the ductwork out of the slab and put it up in the ceiling plane and opened up some of the walls in the existing space to help make it feel more open since it's not a very large home. And we did all new lighting, all new finishes. Here's another view in that same project. And then on the exterior, new pathway, new driveway, landscaping. And in this photo, there was an existing deck. We took that, just resurfaced it and added a new stain and basically just rebuilt the house without adding on an addition. This next project, this on the left is the existing house. You can see the chimney mass. This house has 3 additions on it. There's a carport, a little shed, and also around the back, there's a master bathroom addition. The new carport addition is built out of steel, and that helps it feel a little bit more minimal and open. And also was a suggestion of the DRC when we were reviewing this project. One thing that we did have to do to get the carport approved was ask Fairfax County for a special permit because the carport does protrude into the front yard setback closer than what is permitted. So in this view, you can see the carport, you can see a little bit of the shed, and there's a little bit of the master bathroom addition back here, but everything follows the existing roof lines of the Goodman home. And then in the bathroom, I like to bring in as much natural light as possible with the clear story windows up in the gable, and also views to frame towards the woods out in the backyard. And then my last project, this is the original house and this is the addition. If you say, where the hell's the addition? That's a compliment to me. That means it's I've integrated it really well with the existing structure. This is a new master bedroom, master bathroom structure, and a new studio on the lower level. Again, reusing a lot of the Hollin Hills window structures to just make it feel like an original Goodman home. And here's another view of this addition. This house had an existing terracing in the backyard. We continued the terracing down to a little pathway and walkway down to the new studio addition. And then this is a view from the master bathroom out to the wooded area in the back. So that's a little sampling of my projects. So thank you. It's nice to see you all.
John, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Last is Randy Mars. If you would be so kind as to take over the screen, show us some of your work and tell us about your practice.
Sure. Hi, I'm Randy Mars. I have a small residential firm in McLean. I've been practicing since 1989 on my own, and before that I started in 1979, so I think I'm the oldest of this group. These are pretty good projects. I'm impressed about the projects that I've seen. I think you guys all do great work. We started doing commercial and residential, and then we started doing more and more residential, and now we do almost all residential. And I like that. It's a lot of fun as long as there's enough work. Working in Hollin Hills was a lot of fun because these houses are all great and there's a lot to build on. But there does become a little question that we'll talk about, I think, at the end, which are some of the challenges. And one of them is an aesthetic challenge in that they're all similar, and that's great. but how far can we take it? But it's interesting to see everybody else's work, that everybody has added their own kind of twist to it. So it's Goodman, but it's not necessarily Goodman. It's gone beyond Goodman. And I think that there's a real debate between historians that want to preserve Goodman and non-historians. And I'll just say one thing about that, and then I'll run through two projects really fast, is that I had organized a lecture that Jim Ritter gave, and he renovated a Goodman house. And timing was good, so that he actually met Goodman and took Goodman to see the house renovation. And Jim Ritter did a really great job on this house and really respected the Goodman work, the Goodman aesthetic. And Goodman's response was, "Oh, is that all you could do?" So I really think that Goodman would like to see his work go further. And that's an interesting discussion with the Historic Preservation or Historic Review Committee. But this is a house that we did on Nordock, and we added can you all see this? We added the entry because these houses notoriously do not have entries, that we walked into a wall when we started. So we created a foyer. In some of the new windows we added a little bit larger windows using a similar module, but straying from it a little bit to get a little bit more progressive. But I wanted to show this at the end. This is one of the most proud things in this house of mine, is because we had to stick to this order of the windows in the back, but we wanted to make this room bigger because it was really too narrow to use. So we shifted the wall and borrowed the light from the windows into this room and created a bigger living room. So it was an interesting solution. This is also glass, so this room on the other side of this partition is an office, and it gets plenty of light. This is the corner as you approach it. I love, the clients did a wonderful job picking furniture. I love the furniture they picked. This is the entry at the driveway. We added a lot of glass to it that it already had a lot of glass. I mean, we really opened this wall up, and lots and lots of glass. We straightened a crooked fireplace, but all in all, the house was wonderful. Entry, kitchen. This was the biggest challenge because we opened the space up, but we needed to get more heating and cooling. So we dropped a ceiling in the kitchen and left everything else with the high ceiling. So this drop ceiling was done to create and define the space, but also to enclose the HVAC stuff. And that's that house. We did one,
You stop sharing.
Yeah, I'll do it again. This is another, this is another house that is not a Goodman house, but it was another mid-century house that we did. And these long eaves were present. It's a different style than Hollin Hills, but these long eaves were present, but this part of the house was a mess and it didn't have a second floor, and the client wanted a second floor. So we raised the second floor. We used longer eaves to create a better overhang. And then we used a vertical element in the stairs. And I'm just going to run through this really fast. This is the back. There used to be a pool enclosure. We took that out. This is the entry. You enter around a courtyard, and we created all glass wall here, which is a great window system. It's a LePage window system. This is one of my favorite photographs because it just shows you we were going to do water, but water was too expensive. So we used black stone. And then I found out that black stone was a Japanese technique for water. And this shows the railing detail with the walkway and the stone. Entry, it's built into a hill. Front entry as you approach the house. Living room, which doesn't get used much. This is more of the usable space, and they had the high ceilings. This is actually a deck house. And we used wonderful lighting and exposed the ceiling and use slate on the floor, which is fairly typical for Hollin Hills. Great millwork by this company called Allegheny Woodwork. And a nice living space. And I believe that's all.
All right.
That's my presentation.
No, that was perfect. I was just about to tell you to wrap it up.
Great.
I really appreciate everybody sharing your work. I mean, it really shows the quality of of what we have in Hollin Hills and what you can build on and what you can do with it. I think you all have some amazing stuff, and it's not all just carbon copy, and the creativity that you each brought with you this afternoon, I think is evident in the photographs you showed and the way you describe it. And so I want to now we're going to have a little discussion. The Friends of Hollin Hills came up with 4 questions we wanted to propose to the panel, and we'll let each of them sort of give a brief answer on their take or their response to the question. And then after that, we'll open it up to questions from the chat. So if you have a question and you haven't entered it into the chat yet, go ahead and do so, because once we get through these questions, we're going to open it up to questions from the crowd. And so the first question we propose to the panel is, how do you as an architect specifically approach going about constructing an addition to a Hollin Hills home? And since Randy just got done talking, I'll start back at the beginning and let Rebecca go ahead and give us a brief answer. We'll try to get everybody a chance to comment on each question.
So my start is usually working with the homeowner to narrow down, what is it you want to do? And then I usually start focusing on the shape of the house and how I like to focus on proportions. So I work with how we add the space, keeping the proportions working within the house. And Christine, you said something similar. Is if I finish an addition and somebody goes, wow, the house looks great, to me, that's a compliment. I'd rather not hear, oh, the addition looks really good. I'd rather it just read as one big house. So it's what the client needs versus what kind of shape we can do.
Great, excellent. Michael, how about you and some of your process in approaching a Hollin Hills home?
I think it's very similar. Once we establish the program and we understand what the client's needs are, we really start to look at the building components specifically in Hollin Hills. Like, we know when you go and speak to the design review committee, they're going to be looking for that window module that is, 3 foot 1.5 on center. And John, you and I have had this discussion many times. So we're looking at building components that are consistent. So it's roof shapes, and we're also looking to incorporate the materials that are already existing in Hollin Hills. And that's sort of how we start to organize the plan, by really thinking more about the existing structures and how we can look at them almost as a kit of parts. And there's a window element, there's a wood element, and then there's a large brick element. And you really have to take those building components and combine them and then massage them into the plan view, which you really need, which is the spaces that you're creating for your client.
Nice, excellent. Christine, you're on mute if you want to unmute yourself.
I definitely, everything that Rebecca and Michael just said, and also I'd like to look at how the light flows through the house, and looking at the private and public aspects of how the house is laid out. And yeah, basically what Michael and Rebecca said, that's all part of the planning process.
Randy, no pressure. It appears as everybody's really
Can't
hammered
come up with something after everybody else. Agreed. That's the process that we all do. The first thing that I've learned to look at is the site, though. And, when I started that house on Nordock, there was a house like 2 houses away that had an incredible site, just beautiful site work. And, how to preserve the site and how to make that work is very important. But, that's the architectural process. You talk about program. Ideally, you talk about program and you compare it to budget, and hopefully you come up with something that works where the program equals the budget. But it's the same process for all of us.
Right, awesome. All excellent answers. And this is another one along the same lines. So if somebody steals your answer, you're just gonna have to think on the fly and come up with a new answer. But in your opinion, what's the most unique feature of a Hollin Hills home in terms of design? And we'll start with Rebecca again.
Windows.
Yeah, that's a big one, but that's short answer. So now, Christine, you get all of Rebecca's time.
Can you repeat the question again, John?
In your opinion, what's the most unique feature of a Hollin Hills home? And so Rebecca said windows.
I would say the very minimal corners and structure, the way that the windows intersect with the corners, that's very unusual. It's a very beautiful feature. It's also very difficult to replicate now, just because the county requires so much rules for wind bracing. But I think that's one of the most beautiful features of our home.
Yeah. Randy, why don't you go ahead and a feature and then elaborate on it briefly.
You know, the thing that I think is the greatest feature is the scale and size of the house. I'm so tired of, I'm doing one house now that's a 9,000 square foot house and I hate it. And I think the scale of the houses and the neighborhood is absolutely wonderful, that people don't overtake their properties and overbuild. I think that's the best thing, but it also limits you as to what you could do. But
Awesome. Michael, what do you think?
Randy just stole my answer, but I can elaborate on it a little bit. I think relative to scale, one thing is that the houses in general are built into the site more than a lot of other homes. And then the finished floor level of generally like the first floor level, it's always within several inches of the ground plane. So the idea that the buildings are really low and almost built into the ground, I think is what's really, it's what I like about the neighborhood, and it's a consistent theme throughout. And it's something that we take into consideration when we start our design work, is really trying to keep the buildings lower than the existing building as much as possible, and not to, come up with some McMansion proposal, not only in Hollin Hills, but just in general.
Sure. Great. Okay. We'll start back at the beginning again. So similar question. What are some problems or challenges that you've seen when you've worked on a Hollin Hills home, and a brief elaboration on it, Rebecca?
So Christine touched it a little bit, the wind bracing requirements now. It's a little harder to get as much window as like the old houses have, and especially corner details. I also find that the structure is usually 2x4s, 2x6s, and we have to use 2x8s or 2x10s, 2x12s. So there's a big discrepancy in the thickness outside the house. So it's the little tricks you have to do to make the fascias and rakes all look Hollin Hills using thick structure. That's the biggest challenge.
So I'm going to keep that same question, but I'm going to ask Michael now, because I'm just trying to change up the order a little bit. What are some strategies to try to get that glass that anybody can do, and the pros and cons of each, and to try to maintain compliance with current building code?
Well, it is complicated. I mean, I think to elaborate a little bit on what Rebecca just commented on is, one is you have this conflict between the building code requirements of coming up with R38 insulation, and then the existing buildings, that all the Goodman buildings are framed with 2x8. So that gives you about like more closer to like R16. So you have this thicker ceiling that is coming down. And the other part is that the window walls, for the most part, are within 2 to 6 inches from the ceiling plane. So it's really, really difficult to clip a new addition onto an existing Hollin Hills house and maintain this sort of clean, consistent look that all the windows are the certain height. And the answer to how do you solve that, I think it just comes down to experience. You just
Sure.
you have to know wood framing. You have to know a lot about construction, and you just have to have a cooperative structural engineer where, most of the part, we draw our own structural plans. We figure it out here in our studio, and then we have our engineers do the math and make sure it's going to work.
Right on. I'm going to jump to Randy. Same question, and I'm going to pull it, see if I can lead you in the direction I wanted to go, is alternative structural components to get that glass, like going to the next step and using steel or other engineered components to try to get more glass, but maintain the structural rigidity required by the building code.
well, the only way to get the wind bracing with all that glass is to put steel in the wall. But you can usually bury steel without people knowing it. I mean, it can be very well hidden. I'm sure that everybody who works there knows about how to bury steel or how to satisfy wind bracing. To me, one of the greatest challenges is HVAC, or that we had in that project, was HVAC, because that underground system, it's either broken or it's going to break, and adding to it is tough. And then when you have these high ceilings, you want to preserve the ceilings, and You can't put ducts in there. So where do you put the ductwork that is necessary to do these projects? So that's another challenge besides these wonderful windows. I think the windows are a great challenge, but I think it's a great thing to have to figure out because they're beautiful.
Right. It's fun to try to figure out where you can add more windows, but the harder pills to swallow are the problems. So Christine, how about talking about mechanical a little bit and what you've done?
I agree with Randy. The ductwork needs to come out of the slab, and once you get it out of the slab, finding a place to hide it, it's a real challenge. And but it's important to do so because most of the duct is deteriorating. That's in the slab if it's not relined. So.
Right on. Okay.
Hey, John, can I interrupt you for just a second? Because one
Sure.
thing we touched on steel, but there's also a lot of the strong wall panels and things like that we can use to try to stay in wood construction. We've been using a lot of those to try to meet the wind bracing requirements.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the things I've seen too, just to elaborate briefly, is like, putting your structural panels in the corners if you have to get your bracing in two different directions, but using the rest of your percentages to get glass, that maximize your glass. Yeah, I think the new code that allows for those sort of prescriptive structural panels is helpful. And the Hollin Hills homes almost give you that opportunity with the chunks of wood that happen in between, the windows.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can get those bracing requirements and still get a lot of glass. And that's why I think what we're trying to get across is that it takes someone with experience and an understanding of the rules, and then the design intent of creating something that works in Hollin Hills. And that's why it's important to have somebody who's done work here and who understands the nuances of an Hollin Hills home. And I really appreciate all your answers. One last one, please comment on the use of new materials in construction of Hollin Hills homes. This could be anything from double to triple pane glass, different sidings, different insulations. I'll start with Michael Cook. I haven't started with you yet, but just talk about maybe one new material you feel you've introduced to Hollin Hills and how you did it. And it could be anything.
One is, I know we had a pretty in-depth conversation about one of the projects we completed, and when we were proposing that was on Rebecca, we wanted to use the Shoshigi Bond wood. So and it just turned out one company that we work with, Nakamoto Forestry, they have a 1x6 board. And I know in Hollin Hills, a lot of the exterior siding, because the construction took place over so long, there's a lot of different varieties. Like we've seen 1x4, we've seen 1x6, there's T111, there's a lot of different exterior siding materials that have been used. So I know when we presented the Nakamoto Forestry wood, they actually had a 1x6, and it turns out that Goodman had a dark charcoal-like stain, a semi-transparent stain that he had used. So I think when you get up close to the material, it has a newer look, a more contemporary look, and it's something that's very in vogue today. But I think it still sort of fulfilled the overall historical requirements. When you're standing from the street looking back at the building, it still looked as if it was a charcoal colored house with the white trim. So I think that's one instance where I think it's good that the DRC is opening up their guidelines and their restrictions. I mean, let's talk about it. If you're going to have in the end, you're going to buy a Hollin Hills house and do a $200,000-$300,000 addition to it. Do you really want to put T111 siding on that building? I mean, so I think there has to be some flexibility and limitations, but I think the overall concern should be to try to match what's there as best you can. And if, the Shoshigi Bond wood, you really only see the fact that it's burned wood when you're, 6 feet away from it. But from the street view, the overall look of the house is similar to the original.
Nice. Christine, can you think of a new product you've introduced or something you've changed in terms of what was from original to current materials?
Well, not a new product, but getting back to insulation and the size of the structure. I have used gone back to the 2x8 roof structure that matches as close, as minimal, as close as possible to a Goodman home, and used a closed cell foam insulation to get the required R value without having to use a big chunky structure. So that has helped a lot, the closed cell foam.
Are there any drawbacks to that?
Um,
Cost?
Money.
Yeah, money. It's
I
expensive.
was going for the closed cell foam is not the most inexpensive insulation.
No, it's expensive, but it does let you have a very small size structure.
It's a great way to achieve your R value in a thin profile.
Very
Randy,
true, yes.
any new materials you brought into light? I'm thinking of something.
When we did the house on Nordock, we used the T111. Replacing the T111 was a challenge because it's not exactly the same as it was before. And there are other products now too, like Boral makes a nickel gap siding that's vertical that does the same thing, but it's not the same. So it's not as wide of a reveal. So that's important. But also on the roof, you know, the old gravel roof on the low pitched roofs are really brutal, and trying to come up with something instead of having this gravel, like we actually used asphalt, but really it's the absolute minimum that you can use asphalt and it will work. So a big challenge is the really shallow roofs too.
Excellent. Rebecca, did I give you opportunity to speak on that? Go ahead.
Not yet. I just
Please.
wanted one thing with the spray foam insulation that Christine talked about. I like that because you can eliminate some of the roof venting issues, which on these low slope roofs can be just create a water problem. So that's another good benefit for that. And although this opinion may not be popular, I have started using more PVC trim, especially on my house, on the windows, because we have a lot of shade, we have a lot of window rot, and we've started replacing the 1x stops with PVC. And for once, I've got a window that hasn't rotted for about 4 years. So once it's painted, it looks just like wood, and it stays looking like wood a lot longer than the wood looked like. So that's one of my favorites.
All right. I'm gonna go ahead and dive into some of the chat questions, and if one of y'all has an answer right away and wants to chime in, raise your hand and I'll call on you, or we'll go to each person. So one of the questions is, when you're upgrading from single to double pane windows, for the big panels, that's really just a change in the material. But when it comes to the operable windows down below, the original metal casement windows, what manufacturers have you all, or have any of you found to be a good alternative to the existing original metal casement windows?
I use Pella clad windows.
Rebecca, go ahead.
I use the Pella clad windows. They have a very narrow frame and they seem to work really well with the Hollin Hills frame.
I know the DRC also would always talk about the Anderson, I think it was the 400 or 4000 series. That was sort of the first window that the DRC really, in quote, air quotes, approved. Any other products that come to mind, Michael, that you've used?
Yeah, but the two projects that we're currently doing in Maryland right now, we actually refurbished the old steel frames. We pulled them out and ground all the steel down. Powder coating was a bit expensive, so we just primed them and painted them, and then we got a 3/8 inch insulated tempered piece of glass, and we put that back in, and then fix the hardware as best we can, and we're just basically going with that. When you go to the windows, the other challenge that I think everybody needs to understand, when you get to a bedroom, obviously those low 18 by 24 inch windows do not pass egress code. So you always have to, and be prepared that even though you might be a diehard preservationist, you're going to have to change the windows in the bedroom to create proper egress, which is 5.7 square feet. The larger window has to fit in that opening. So one of the 4 back bedroom windows with the openings in the bedrooms, one of those has to be inoperable. So some people get upset about that, but it's just
this is a random question, because are there exceptions in the existing building code when it applies to historic properties that allow you to not have an egress window, or are you forced to replace a window and get yourself?
Don't know.
Yeah,
I would say based on liability, I'm putting the window in.
yeah.
Code says you've got to have an egress window.
Yeah.
Right.
So it can be smaller. Casement windows, usually I use a 3-foot casement window, and it fits in the 3-foot grid of the Hollin Hills window. And it use low, a Pella thin frame, and you get used to it.
Do you do that in one of the upper windows or one of the lower windows?
Upper.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Christine, anything? Diane?
I do the same as well. And all of the manufacturers are now making very low profile windows because of a mid-century modern is very, very popular style. So Martin, Pella, Colby and Colby, they all make an excellent window out of various different materials, not just wood. So.
All right. Have any of you all used engineered lumber or engineered wood instead of traditional wood or steel to accomplish some of the more unusual features, our overhangs or the thin profiles? Have any of you had success using those products? Michael?
Yes, almost all the time we have to use LVLs to laminated veneer lumber beams to achieve the overhangs, and especially if we're doing some tricky framing, where like say it's a shed roof, upward shed roof, and then we have a larger window span, and so you almost always have to use LVLs. We're always trying to look for about 4.5 to 5.5 inches at the very edge of the fascia. So in order to get that, it's often a 8-inch LVL, leave in the building, and then it has a tapered look to it, similar to the Goodman butterfly roof shapes. So that's how we basically achieve that.
Anybody else have any other experiences with engineered lumber worth noting?
Well, a lot of homes with a second story in Hollin Hills, they're framed with 2x8s, and I always use an LVL, 7.5-inch LVL. It's a lot more stable. And again, it adds price, but I think it's worth
Sure.
the stability that it brings.
Another question from the chats. What new technologies allow a designer to maintain the look but meet modern codes? And I think maybe this would apply to either maybe windows profiles we talked to, maybe different technologies for HVAC, register grills and that sort of thing. Randy, you used anything new in Hollin Hills that you felt was a...
I mean, the mini split systems are getting better and better and more attractive. You used to have this ugly, like in the wall thing. Now you don't have to do that. You can get ducted. So that allows you to put separate units in a separate building, like if you have a new structure and you're doing an addition. So you don't have to run ductwork from the HVAC room. So that's a good idea when you don't have any place to run ductwork.
No, I like it. Rebecca, has technology helped you solve any Hollin Hills problems?
No, I mean, I think Randy hit it with the HVAC and the mini splits. You can get a little bit smaller systems because you're not running across the whole house. You could just kind of do piece by piece, and then you get some zones so you can heat the south side and the north sides differently, which makes the house more comfortable too. So
sort of one new thing, Michael, I'm going to ask you, because I've seen it in some of your projects, and I think it's sort of a newer technology, but works well in Hollin Hills homes. Some of the linear diffusers you've used to get your HVAC in place, but keep it slim and low profile.
Yeah, sure. I think you covered it. Yeah, if you can, that's one thing we're looking at. I was thinking more along the lines of the roofs. So we've been using some TPO roofs, which are for low pitch shed roofs, and we've used that. And I don't know if that's necessarily a new technology. It's just different than the gravel built up tar roofs. And I think it is good if you don't really see the roof from the street, because the seams are heavy and there's an overlap there. And I just don't think that they look so great, but I know that they hold up really well over time. And being there's so many trees in Hollin Hills, I think it's a good solution if you don't necessarily see that much of the roof.
Yeah, I think some of the welded TPO roofs, or the ones back in the day when you had the rolled asphalt roof and you had you were hot applying it and you had the blobs of asphalt sticking around, there were really the dark horizontal stripes from that rolled roofing was one of the real, I think, drivers behind the DRC not allowing that any type of rolled roofing on any roof that you could see. But I think some of the newer roofing technologies that have some fairly discrete welds where you're welding, a piece of white material to a piece of white material, and those seams fade away, I think it is a benefit to Hollin Hills homes, especially when a piece of your roof might be visible. And I know the one you're talking about, Michael. I just did a new TPO roof on my house, and I'm very pleased with it. And I had gravel for a while, but it became a maintenance issue. And I think the new membrane roof is a game changer.
Yeah, I think it's if they, there's a lot of trees, and if trees are crashing into your roof all the time, not that TPO is puncture proof, but it is definitely it's a pretty durable membrane, and I think it can take a beating and still keep your house dry.
So Christine, I want to ask you, because you kind of hit on it in your presentation of some of your work, but and I'm sort of in this position also with my house. Talk about how you can alter a house or renovate a house without doing an addition. What can you do within the footprint of a Hollin Hills home to make it more usable for a more modern?
Right. Well, definitely open up some walls to make more rooms open to each other, and maybe reconfigure bathroom or kitchen layouts to just create better use of space. But you can get pretty creative and making a home feel new and fresh without having to do an addition to it.
Anybody else have any sort of internal? Rebecca, go ahead.
Well, I know some of the older style of Hollin Hills houses are just little rooms, and now everybody wants the big open spaces. And one of the first projects I showed you is we did that, just sort of flipped the flow of the house a little bit. But with the roof framing that most houses have, the truss framing, you can kind of open up a lot of the house without too many structural changes.
Yep.
But you do have to kind of watch what your structure is.
Yeah, I think the bones of the houses, sort of the basic bones, really give you that opportunity, that early sort of truss work. Although you have to pay attention when you start pulling the walls out. They are designed to support, because some of the original designs had full span, full side to side spans in the basic design. And I think you don't realize it when you have a chopped up house that you're really underneath the truss, and you can pull all the walls out and open up the house considerably from the original design, because the original floor plans were, there were 50s and 60s when rooms were small and there was not a lot of interaction. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity with the existing structure.
Well, it's nice too, when you can take out a center wall and you get glass, you're in one space and you have glass, big glass this way and big glass that way.
Yeah.
So you've got both sides of the house, and it really kind of opens up your house even more.
It's great. It's one of the more stunning things about the homes in this neighborhood is when you're in them, to be able to look out 2 or 3 sides of a home and all glass at the same time is something you don't get a lot. And I don't care where you go. And this is a really special place. How about, I'll come to each of you, and I'll start with Randy. What kind of, anything you've done to try to maximize energy conservation in a renovation? And it doesn't have to be here, just more recent work and steps you take to try to improve efficiency.
I don't think that I think we use great insulation, and we talked about using closed cell insulation. It performs incredibly well. And the new windows perform incredibly well. Going from single pane in these houses, going from single pane to double pane make a huge difference alone. And the long overhangs on the south exposure is great. When you get to west and east, especially west, you really have to put up some kind of sun shading device. But what we found out with Nordock was they had such nice foliage on their property that's a great sun shading device. So it's a natural sun shading device. So besides that, we haven't gone to any extreme lengths of energy conservation.
Rebecca, do you have any new technology that you've employed in Hollin Hills?
No, I think it's pretty much what Randy said. It's really the insulation. I have used double, I've even used triple glass windows. And that's sort of where it falls.
About who do you have a lot of experience with tankless water heaters?
We've put those in a couple homes. Sometimes they work really well. Sometimes they don't.
It seems like the old tankless water heaters were having a buildup and making them fail. But I think they've modified the technology, and I think that they're pretty successful right now.
Michael, any technology stuff come to mind?
I'd sticking with the hot water topic, hot water heater. I just think a high efficiency hot water heater that's super insulated. Problem with tankless is that it sometimes it takes a while for the hot water to get to you.
Sure
And
does.
so sometimes just having a really big supersized, they are more expensive. They're like twice as much money, but I think that you get some savings over the long term. And then obviously the windows makes a huge difference to have insulated glass, like a 3/4 inch dual panel glass window units. It makes a huge difference. It's a lot less
Christine?
drafty. So it's an expensive endeavor. The whole thing, it costs a lot of money to do, especially a house of glass in Hollin Hills.
Yeah, for sure. Christine, how about you?
Well, when the Hollin Hills homes were built, the slabs were not insulated, and now just putting a lot of insulation in a slab on grade will make a big difference. And using hydronic heat at the slab also is a great way to provide heat. And also,
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
try to minimize the amount of new gas-fired appliances and as much as possible.
Yeah, radiant floor heating, I think is, although it's not new, I think the newer technologies in floor heating are
They're
really
very good.
something that the Hollin Hills folks could benefit from, especially when you can't, if you are limited in your ability to duct heat from your mechanical unit to somewhere, you can install a radiant heating in an addition and meet your heating requirements, maybe, or, to a degree. And Christine, I'm going to stick with you because you said it earlier. In this area, I know we have a lot of problems with marine clay.
Yes.
How has that affected any of your work here, and what steps did you have to take to resolve it?
Well, helical piers, that's the best way to resolve it. And literally marine clay, one house can have it and the neighboring house cannot. So it literally is in vein. So if you do, the county now has all of the soils mapped, so they will building permit if they know that there's marine clay. You'll have to do a soil study. And I found that the best way is the helical piers to provide support for the foundation.
And I'm happy to, but if you want to describe what a helical pier is briefly for everybody.
I'll let you go ahead, John.
So a helical pier is it's driven into the ground instead of a typical where you would dig a hole and fill it full of concrete to make a pier to build something on. A helical pier most often is drilled into the ground, and they drill them and drill them and drill them until they either hit something solid or until the torque on the pier has become so strong that the machine can't drive the pier into the ground any longer. And then you have basically a steel pole that's attached to this pier, and you can build off of that. And I know there have been a lot of remediations, or a number of remediations in Hollin Hills using helical piers to correct sliding and cracks in slabs, where you can basically cut a hole in the slab in your living room, drill a helical pier down into the ground till it stops, and then they'll usually run steel across it underneath your slab and or lift your slab, but then you can rest that slab onto the steel and the pier itself, and you've basically restructured the frame of your house. Now it's sitting on helical piers instead of on the footings, or the helical piers are put in to bolster your footings to ideally keep your house from slipping down the hill. That's just a nutshell. I'm not an engineer. It's a nutshell description.
Well, also in this area, you might as well just expect to have your footings be 4 feet deep as opposed
Absolutely.
to
Yeah. There's a code minimum at frost depth. I think it's 30 inches, but I've never seen a Fairfax County footing go less than 4 feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about a brief discussion, and we'll start with Randy, about how far to push an addition. I know we've talked a little bit about additions that sort of are in harmony with the Hollin Hills homes, but we do have some in the neighborhood that are in contrast, but they're still crisp, modern additions. Brief thoughts on how you feel about what additions that should either look like the original house or maybe stand out a little bit.
Well, I'm glad that this is brought up. I mean, I love the houses in Hollin Hills, and you talked about how long the architecture or the design should last, and in 100 years, will we still be doing the same thing? I think that it's a lot to build on, but being religiously tied to like the 3-foot 1-inch module, as Michael said, it's brutal. And it limits you to what you can do. And I don't know that we are tied to this, because my experience was I was able to put bigger glass in, but I tied it together with the glass that reflected the same aesthetic. So I like preserving the design aesthetic. And I guess the tricky part is it's really easy when you're a historic review committee or historic preservation committee to say this isn't consistent with what we do, but it's really hard to say it's consistent in style, but it's different. And I think that the beauty of a lot of the Hollin Hills homes are the fact that all these architects are pushing it a bit and modernizing it, bringing it forward, but using the same aesthetic basically as it originally was. And I think that just like I gave the instance of Jim Ritter having Goodman visit a house, I don't think Goodman would want the houses to be copied and multiplied. I think that he would want them to develop to a degree.
Sure.
But I don't know. I mean, we have a good community here. I'd be curious to know what the community thinks.
How about you, Christine?
Well, what I like what Randy said is that each of the architects here, they bring their own style and vision to the projects that will naturally create their version of what they feel is something that fits in with the architectural style. I do like to work with the modules and the roof lines and make the addition feel as if it was part of the original house. But I admire all the different styles of additions and architecture that we have in Hollin Hills.
Rebecca, what do you think?
Oh, I agree with Christine, what she said. I mean, exactly.
Michael, I'm gonna let you go ahead, Michael. I know we've had this conversation, talked a little bit about an addition looking like the original house or times when an addition can be something special.
I think if you take the design approach in such a way where you're looking at the overall, like the larger design objectives, like a lot of Goodman houses have double cantilevers. I think if you just separate that concept and then you try to build that into your building, I think it's another way of creating a new architecture that is definitely referential to the old. I already talked a lot about window modules as well as I think the other material considerations. I think it's really important to do that. And I think the other thing I've mentioned numerous times now, I think that you have, depending on the size of the addition, most of the additions we do are smaller than the existing building. And I don't think that, although it's not I think it's a place for architects to shine and have some expression, but at the same time, I think it's a really difficult balance. And it's a balance that the architect has to be very serious about, is to not make it overwhelm the existing addition. And I think that's sort of our strategy. And I think it's also the client's interest too. There's many different levels that clients that are working on mid-century homes that they want to take. And often some really want to preserve the original architecture down to the cabinets. I think it's right. I think it's a really big mixture of questions and concerns that come up. And I think it's just a matter of working the design over and over again, and then also working with the design review committee to find a happy medium between all those parties and ideas.
Yeah, I agree, and I like what you had said earlier, and again we've talked about it. Is there is a kit of parts here, and I think the kit of parts that's here actually offers a lot of opportunity. There's different sizes and shapes of overhangs. There's a lot of differences in the textures on the buildings, if it's block or if it's brick or if it's siding or if it's T111. We've got horizontal siding, vertical siding, different windows. So there's a lot of stuff here you can work with. And I think, with careful thought and application and effort, that you really get, something really nice. And I think you all have shared some really nice work with us. And I think we're at, I know we're over our hour. And
can I say one more thing about that?
Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
Okay. I was charged recently with doing two houses next to each other, and I was debating how similar to make these. And the client of mine brought up a really interesting term. And he said, Randy, both houses are going to have the same DNA. And to me, I would apply that to Hollin Hills, and that is, make sure all of the work that's done to any of the houses has the same DNA, but let it develop a little bit. And I'd be curious to know, I mean, it's clear to me that depending on who is on the design review committee determines how rigorous you stick to the letter of the law.
That is a factor.
Keep it with don't ever change the DNA, but develop.
Yeah, I like it. Christine, what do you think? Christine Hooks. Time-wise.
Yeah, I mean, we have a couple more minutes. If you want to do maybe one last question from the
Okay.
chat,
See what I've got here from the chat.
and then we'll call it.
Most of them actually did pretty good. One of the questions was how has working with the current building code versus how the code that was in place when the neighborhood was built caused you strife or maybe presented opportunities for you. Christine Kelly?
Well, the railings, Hollin Hills railings, they don't meet code, but if you touch them, then you can leave it. But I think Michael brought it up earlier in the conversation that it's best to just bring things up to code for safety and enjoyability and comfort level.
Michael, any thoughts?
Insulation, that's the trickiest thing. And,
Yeah.
you know, thank God there's closed cell insulation. It eliminates the vents. I mean, everybody's talking about it, so it must be a common theme. Yeah, if you used like a combination of closed cell and bad insulation, you don't have to have that perimeter vent strip and worry about how air goes in and flows through the roof thickness and then out, you know, into, how to, yeah, I think I wrapped it up. Sorry.
Yeah, to vent the roof. So, and briefly, we probably should have hit this earlier for the rest of the gang here. Closed cell foam insulation, what we're talking about is spray foam insulation. There's two kinds: open cell foam and closed cell foam. Open cell is a little bit cheaper, and yet you build it up in a thickness to get a certain amount of R value for that insulation. And some people, you can think of the rigid insulation that you see sometimes, like the blue rigid insulation. So there's open cell and closed cell. Open cell is, as it says, the cells are literally open and water can actually pass through it. Whereas closed cell foam insulation, each cell closes up on itself and water won't pass through. And that's why the closed cell foam gives you a higher R value. And that's why we keep talking about the closed cell foam insulation, because in our 8-inch ceilings, you can spray 8 inches of closed cell foam and get your R30, but it comes with a price tag because closed cell foam insulation is the more expensive of the two for sure, but you don't get the full R value if you do open cell at the same depth. So that, you know, there's a cost benefit of open cell versus closed. Rebecca, how about you? Have you code issues?
Well, first, I'm not sure, was there even a building code in place when we built these homes, like in 1955? My house, I don't think so. But
I'm
yeah,
Robbie.
I mean, we kind of touched it, the windows, the window egress, you know, insulation, wall framing. It's all kind of changed.
Yeah. Randy, any final thoughts on code stuff?
You know, code is what it is. I don't think there's, you know, we all deal with it and it's there for people's safety. So I don't really care. The biggest thing with these homes is egress to me, that you can't, you need to put an egress window in. So you can stick to the same module, but there needs to be an egress window.
Sure. Okay. I appreciate it. Want to wrap it up, Christine Hooks? Well, right on. I want to thank all four of you. Really, I know all you individually. You're all friends of mine, and that's probably part of why I reached out for you and lured you into this. But I hope you enjoyed yourselves and enjoyed sharing your work and talking with everybody. And I also hope that everybody in the group here that joined our Zoom call enjoyed it equally as much as I did. I'm an architecture nerd, and I enjoy talking about it. And whether you can see everybody, we had about 100 people sign up, so it's one of our biggest events so far this year. And Christine Hooks, do you want to do a wrap up?
Sure. Yeah, I don't have much of a wrap up except to thank you, John, for doing such a fabulous job of putting this together and moderating. And, you know, thank you to all of our panelists. I think everyone did an amazing job. It was a super fascinating discussion. I enjoyed it, and I'm getting, you know, comments in the chats right now that other people enjoyed it as well. So thank you all so much, and thanks everyone for coming and attending. And hopefully we'll be able to do these in person again sometime soon.
Definitely. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.